Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for Sunday, the 15th of December. Just to remind you that we are doing Trucks Under the Christmas Tree, a fundraising campaign. ATP Geopolitics is in the lead, if you like, of all of the different fundraisers. Some wonderful channels on this list, but you guys have been awesome. If you go and look at the Trucks Under Christmas Tree ATP Geopolitics page, you can check the videos that have been specifically recorded to show you what the first truck would be made into, and to give you a sense of the unit that the second truck is going to go to, which is the same brigade, I believe, that the or same battalion that the famous smoking Ukrainian soldier who said Slava Ukraini and then was shot was a member of. So all the information is on there. This will be linked in the description below. It'll be wonderful if we can make 20,000 euros, 2 trucks before Christmas. Fantastic, guys. Thank you so much. Right, moving on to the news. We start with the Ukrainian General Staff figures, all the usual caveats apply. And you can see some, you can find them in the description below. You can see some insanely high numbers here, record-breaking numbers. I've got a message from Dell, who does Dell stats, so just to remind you what Dell stats look like, also linked under the, I was just writing Dell there, it's OneDrive, also linked under the video in the description. Now, Dell says this because there have been some weird and wonderful statistics and anomalies. He said, okay, festive greetings. Firstly, we are made aware of a large aerial attack on the 12th. However, figures published on the 13th did not reflect this. Today, the General Staff have made an announcement with revised figures on correcting the running total. So when you look at the data in Dell's spreadsheet here, we'll just get back to today. Oh, that's not working very well. Too much data on. You can see there are red dates at the top of that data list here, and that means that something funky's gone on. So if you remember a few days back, there were some readjustments with some data, some readjustments today. He's added notes in. You can go and read those notes. So and previously there was another adjustment. Occasionally they make a mistake and then they readjust it. So one day back a couple of months ago, they had 99 in the special equipment and 0 in the vehicles and fuel tanks, and I think that was just an inputting error, and then that affected the data, and then they readjusted that later, so it looks, something like this, red numbers around. So anyway, that's what he said. So I've taken their reports, and in order to balance out the spikes, retrospectively applied what I believe to be the figures for the 13th. You can see my working shown in the comments for each cell, shown in red text. Neither of the drone or cruise missiles for the attack on the 12th made any new records, nor was it the largest combined figure. So I was saying they were very high figures, almost 200 drones and almost 100 missiles, but actually over the whole course of the war there have been bigger days. But the detailed report on the aerial attack shows 56. This is a reference I've used to revise the figures for the 12th, and he gives a Facebook reference from the Ukrainian General Staff. Aside from this, there does appear to be a new record high for vehicle and fuel tanks at 181. I have no idea if this is also an adjustment to previous underreporting. So that's really useful. Thanks for that. I mean, he does tireless work on this, so thank you, Dell, every day, providing stats for us, or not the stats, but the presentation of these stats. So we can see that there are a couple of records still in there. So we've got cruise missiles at a 30-day high. That is, oh no, is that, let's have a look if that is, no, that is cruise missiles. So that is a 30-day rolling average high for cruise missiles. Interesting there. And we also have a record, as you can see, a single day record for vehicles and fuel tanks, because there were huge numbers put in, but not really sure about that. That looks to me like an adjustment, because that's a huge number. Anyway, 1,280 personnel is still significant. 12 tanks is above the daily average. 32 armored personnel vehicles is well above the daily average, and these categories suggest that there was quite a bit of activity yesterday. 26 artillery systems also above the daily average. Then we have 3 multiple launch rocket systems. We've had some pretty empty categories here in terms of MLRS and anti-aircraft warfare systems for some time. We've now got 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems and 3 MLRS. Just in case you don't believe me, if we look at those categories down here, so we have, oh no, they're up here, anti-aircraft 2, MLRS 3, and actually over the course of the last few weeks, it's been 000, all of those zeros across there for MLRS for a couple of weeks, a few days of the odd anti-aircraft warfare system, but it really has been very low, to the point where if we look at anti-aircraft warfare systems as a single category here, the losses, you can see that the if I just lift that up there, yep, so you can see that the density of orange suggests, a lot more losses, and we are seeing a lack of density around here at that end of the graph, and that leads to a shallower blue line, which is the total. The steeper that gradient, so there is the steepest gradient in that line, which it reflects the large numbers of pieces of kit they were losing at that time, which is during the May counteroffensive when the Ukrainians realised they had to take out a load of air defences and went explicitly after them. And then that maintained for some time, but it seems to, although there's some spikes here, it seems to have levelled off a little bit recently. And I've been wondering whether the Ukrainians just are struggling to find those targets. The occasional, massive spike, but that could well have been a readjustment there. So, always trying to find out a narrative, a story from the data. And to continue, vehicles and fuel tanks, 181. Pretty sure that would be a readjustment, and 4 pieces of special equipment. The TLDR is some heightened activity yesterday, resulting in more equipment losses for the Russians. Now, let's try and fill in our jigsaw puzzle to present a picture of what's going on. Anton Groshenko says here, Russian economy is growing despite unprecedented sanctions, Putin said yesterday. Well, what is really growing is unprecedented terms under Putin's rule. Cemeteries of Russian soldiers and the ruble-dollar exchange rate. Quote, here are these boys just a month ago. There were only 9 graves here at this particular cemetery. That was a month ago, and today they lie in 2 rows already. A Russian volunteer, Yekaterina Dvoryankina, filmed this in Tolyatti, Samara region. She showed a number of Russian soldiers buried at one of the local cemeteries, and that's just a small part. The rest will stay forever in Ukrainian fields. So these are the very few soldiers they actually get out of Ukraine and put in coffins and send them back to their families, knowing who they are. Vast majority stay on the fields as missing in action. But here we have, just a month ago, there were 9 soldiers in this kind of new section of a cemetery, and now there are 2 whole rows. The body bags keep coming. The question is, will that have an effect on the population back in Russia? Well, they seem to be very pliable, compliant population. Right, David D, take his claims with a pinch of salt. He says, from reports in at least 3 areas, 2 in Kursk and 1 in the south, Russians attacked today with no vehicles and little artillery. Huge losses reported on the Russian side. So he is talking of rumours of infantry assaults led with no vehicles, although there were some fairly heavy vehicle losses yesterday as well. Tendar says the Ukrainian generals... I've reported several times. I did 2 breaking news updates on North Koreans, or Norks, as some people have said. Norks being used, it's a bit of a slang term in the UK. Norks being used on the Kursk front, but some claiming possibly on the Pokrovsk sector, in that sector as well. So Ukrainian intelligence, the GUR, has received information that North Korean troops have killed 8 Kadyrovites. The friendly fire occurred due to language problems. So the quote is, or the claim is here, in the process of the DPRK troops on the battlefield, language barrier remains a difficult obstacle to management and coordination of actions. Because of the above problem, North Korean soldiers opened friendly fire on the vehicles of so-called Akhmat battalion. The result was 8 Kadyrovites killed. One presumes that's not from an argument due to language barrier, but maybe not realizing that they were Russian troops as opposed to Ukrainian troops, and trying to take them out due to some communication issue. And then we move on to other North Korean news. Now, I reported this yesterday. Ukrainian MOD Defense Directorate, the GUR, again, the intelligence, say that North Korean troops suffered at least 200 casualties conducting open field meat assaults on the Kursk front. It appears Putin cares even less about the North Korean fighters than the Storm Z fighters. Now, this was geolocated, this video, to the Kremanoya area of the northwestern part of the Kursk sector. There are claims that these are unarmed soldiers. They could just be moving rather than attacking, moving from one position to another. So there are lots of ifs and buts and maybes about the claims coming out. But there's a few bits I forgot to say yesterday in my breaking news update. I'm sure I had it linked, but I just didn't go over it. Anyway, there are reports from Ukrainian soldiers that North Koreans have indeed launched an offensive, not in Kursk, but in Pokrovsk, with their actions resembling a Zerg rush. So that is a claim coming from Ukrainians in the Pokrovsk front. Take it with a pinch of salt. There is an image here of a North Korean soldier pleading to a drone above. So that does lead us to believe that, well, there is at least some evidence that they're involved potentially in combat operations. Although drones can hit 20 kilometers behind the front line. Here's another comment from a Ukrainian soldier about the Koreans. It was reported they went into battle a week ago. I reported this one previously. They suggest that the Russian claims regarding the involvement of Koreans in the fighting for the village of Plakovo, which is on the eastern side of that Kursk front, might have indeed been true. So this is what I reported yesterday. Now, what I forgot was this, is that Zelenskyy 2 nights ago came out and actually said himself that North Koreans have been joining assaults in Kursk. This one is yesterday. He had said it, I think, before my video yesterday. So there are 2 times I think it's been mentioned. Anyway, North Korean units have sustained, quote, noticeable losses alongside Russian troops in Kursk Oblast, he said last night. So that is significant when you've got the president himself making the claim. And then you've got the GUR, so the intelligence again, saying Russia plans to involve North Korean soldiers in assaults in Kursk region in the near future. They said that on the 13th, so 2 days ago. So this is a GUR at least laying the groundwork, or laying the groundwork for the idea that the North Koreans are going to be involved imminently. Well, then also these claims that are coming out that they have been involved. Some of the servicemen are being transferred to the front line, says the intelligence agency. Then we have this. Reports are coming in from Russian forces conducting meat grinder assaults in columns with no armoured transport support near the village of Kruglenkoye on the Kursk bridgehead. Despite heavy losses, they continue to advance, desperately trying to carry out Putin's orders. And if you want to read that, no technical support at all. The guys were sent in lines, like in the Great Patriotic War. The guys come under heavy fire. Many died, many were wounded. What happened next at 10 o'clock? The second group went out, even more numerous and again on foot, but thanks to the first group shaking up the enemy, the second group managed to break through with huge losses. The guys are securing their position. So this seems to be the way that the way that the Russians do it. This is the 810th Marine Brigade there, who have had a bit of a tonking up there in Kursk, but sending in these meat assaults and still taking the ground eventually, just at huge loss rates. As of now, the wounded are not being evacuated. Reinforcements are coming. It's still hot in the forest. The guys have also advanced further north. The tactic is the same. But here, after losing nearly half of the team dead or wounded, the guys managed to push through and secure their position in the first attempt. The question is, at what level was the order given to conduct such an assault? Who planned it? Why was there no support? And most importantly, why did someone start taking... when will someone start taking responsibility for this? There is also progress from the eastern side of the settlement of Naidanov. 34th Brigade and 1427th Regiment worked there. The idea behind planning the attack is the same. How many guys we lost, this will be reported later, but some of the command are already poking holes for medals. So this is a Russian source saying that the Russians have made tremendous losses, but again, as long as they take territory, that's all they seem to care about. Tremendous personnel losses with a lack of support from mechanized equipment. Right, bad news for the Ukrainians yesterday. The Su-25, possibly in the Kherson region, was taken out by an S-400 anti-aircraft missile system. Pilot didn't manage to avoid the missile and died. He's from the 299th Tactical Aviation Brigade, so shot down in that southern direction in his Su-25. Bad news for the Ukrainians there. Then we have, this is a not the first mine-laying drone we have seen, that's for sure. But we got a Ukrainian soldier saying, the situation on the front line in winter 2024, quote, you walk across the field, there are no people. Drones above and drones below are just, drones going about their business. You wonder whether humans will be needed very much at all on battlefield in decades to come. Right, on December the 14th, 2024, in the city of Krasnodar territory, Russia, saboteurs burned an enemy Su-30 fighter jet right in the airfield. And here's a video from the main director at the Intelligence Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. But it's not the first time we've seen this. Like, we've seen a number of helicopters taken out, and you're wondering, what is the security like at these air bases? Because partisans appear to be able to get onto the airbase with relative ease and then burn aircraft. Anyway, that's absolutely brilliant news that a Su-30 can be taken out on the ground. Hopefully that happens far, far more. Also, before that, on December the 13th, partisans burned 3 Russian railway locomotives in the city of Krasnodar. Actually, the correct model of the burnt Russian fighter jet is a Su-27 SM or an SM2. The tail number 16 is also visible, so a bit of a correction there. More photos of this Su-27 from Russian media. That is the exact plane that was burnt there. Anyway, we'll focus a little bit on this partisan activity at a locomotive rail yard there, because Intel Schizo says, I think this might be the very first instance of partisans directly targeting a rail yard. They burned 3 locomotives, and credit to this source aimed in for tracking the identification of the locomotives. 3 locomotives belong to Krasnodar Locomotive Depot TCHE 12 of the North Caucasus Railway District. So you've even got the locomotives there, a couple of Czech ones, and a Luhansk built train as well. So that's excellent news for the Ukrainians. Individual locomotives have been sabotaged previously, but I believe this is the first time where we've seen a sabotage conducted at multiple locomotives at the same location. At the same time, we need more of it. This is good. Would be great if Ukrainian drones would be doing this job, since they're perfectly capable of doing it. Excellent news there. Burning Russian locomotives when Russia is such a heavily locomotive reliant nation due to its size. Railways are insanely important, so kind of burning trains and burning relay points and relay boxes and whatnot. This is super important. Now, indeed, we continue with the theme of trains. The Ukrainians have claimed to have destroyed an enemy train in Zaporizhzhia region carrying vital fuel for the Russian invasion. I mean, that is a significant bit of fire there. And of course, that kind of really heavy burning on quite a large piece of track will ruin the track. Now, track can be fairly easily fixed, but obviously the more track you take out, the better that is, and especially if you have to remove all of the stuff on top of the track too. So Kyiv says 40 fuel tanks worth $4 million were wrecked in yesterday's unique multi-stage operation to cut off the logistics route from occupied Crimea. This is absolutely bloody brilliant. Ukraine says a sabotage IED on the railway track stopped the Russian train carrying the fuel. Then HIMARS struck the first and last carriages, so fuel in the middle could not be salvaged. So clever. That's really, really good news. That is fantastic. This is exactly what Ukraine need to be doing, and need to be doing more of it. But it did appear to need to be started with an IED place, so that's partisan activity again. Okay, then there is news of a bus which was transporting wounded Russian servicemen crashed into a Ural with other wounded Russian servicemen in Voronezh region in Russia. 5 servicemen were killed and 46 were injured after already being injured. Goodness me. So that double, as someone said, they were already wounded. Now they're double injured. Insults to adding insult to injury. Okay. Then we have a man in Yekaterinburg throwing 4 Molotov cocktails at a military conscription office there. So far, the police have not found him. There you go. Just, four of those, and then does a runner. Pretty risky stuff, it has to be said, out in the open there, and filming it as well. I presume he's filming it, but maybe he's not filming it. Maybe it's someone else. Okay, now bad news or good news in terms of Russian stuff being lost. Bad news environmentally. A bit of a shocker here. So Russian tanker Voronezh 212 is reportedly in distress near the Kerch Strait. According to Russian media, on board are 13 crew members and approximately 4,300 tons of fuel. Well, actually, it's fully broken up. I mean, that is the front of the boat broken off there. That's a real shame environmentally. Obviously, that's going to hurt Russia in terms of fuel exports and whatnot. You can see already the fuel pouring out of that as the tanker is just broken in two. Black Sea can be pretty wavy, even though it's a closed-in sea there. We've seen some pretty mental storms there over the course of the war. So, but then we hear it's not one, but maybe two. The waves reportedly broke the bottom of two Russian vessels at once, the Voronezh 212 and the Voronezh 239. That's yet to be confirmed. So you could have two tankers in all sorts of trouble there. Wow. Okay, and then we have, finally for this section, busy day today, a newly constructed building on fire in the Moscow suburb of Fryazino. Could be an insurance scam by the developer since the housing market has crashed. But there you go. It is another hashtag Russia on fire incident there, and that's a pretty sizable fire going on. Right, let's move to distant strikes, because that was a busy section there, wasn't it? Okay. The Ukrainians receiving a lot of unwanted Christmas gifts from the Russians there. 108 Shahed drones, including 49 lost by electronic warfare, and 3 drones returned to Russia. All of them were lost. So that's a 100% interception rate. So if that's 52, that's going to be 56 were shot down. So 56 shot down, 49 electronic warfare, and 3 being spoofed and returning to Russia, which is a form of electronic warfare. Good news from the Ukrainians there in terms of their rate. Okay, explosions have been heard in Mykolaiv. They were heard there around 7 a.m. this morning, according to the Oblast Governor Vitaly Kim. Haven't heard too much of him since the beginning of the war. He was all over the shop at the beginning of the war. Throughout the night, Ukraine's Air Force has warned of the threat of Russian drone attacks targeting various regions of the country. So it could have been an early morning missile attack. Now, the Russians have claimed that this is under control and has been extinguished, but they had claimed that 2 nights ago as well. And the oil depot in Oryol is, well, worse and worse. So a second tank caught fire there. And it is that some really significant imagery, some significant damage having been done there. If we go back to, it's just this one. Close-up footage of fire at Oryol depot last night. Really significant fire. Russian MOD claimed that overnight air defense systems. So this is now moving on. There was another one I had lined up talking about how a second unit there had caught fire. Anyway, Russian air defense systems intercepted and destroyed apparently 15 Ukrainian drones. Of these, 13 were allegedly neutralized over the Black Sea, while one drone was shot down over Kursk and one over Belgorod. Later, the head of Tuapse district, so that's Russia's Krasnodar Krai, Sergei Boyko, stated that an attempted Ukrainian drone attack on Tuapse, so there's a refinery there that's been hit before, there's a port there that's been hit before, was repelled, causing no casualties or damage. So the Russians claiming that they have repelled all the drone attacks last night from the Ukrainians. Of course, they always say that, so whether that was true or not, I don't know. But there is definitely evidence, and oops, I didn't mean to show that. I tried to stop it and instead turned on the volume. Absolutely unique footage of a drone aircraft. So this is one of those Foxbat aircraft that's been turned into a drone, has hit somewhere in Grozny in Chechnya. Now, this definitely seems like it is a Ukrainian drone because we know that they've done that with those planes. I was saying previously, I don't know whether these smaller drones that have hit some of these barracks buildings in Grozny have been the Ukrainians, because it's a bit random sending like single small drones into Grozny, and B, like, I don't know that it helps them to get Kadyrov all riled up and wanting to help Russia even more. I would think that that's you're playing with fire a little bit. You can laugh off the Kadyrovites all you like, but really I would be concentrating on Russia and targets inside Russia. However, it appears that they are going for Chechnya. I don't think this is a false flag or a result of maybe Dagestanis that have an issue with the Chechens at the moment, with some internal brewing problems there. Local residents claim that the attacked building belongs to the special police, the OMON. There is no, I've already gone through that one. There's more footage of this strike as well. There's various bits of footage of the drone flying over and hitting in Grozny. Here you can see it's all on fire, but the one before that is a converted Aeropract A-22 Foxbat. There is a part of the video before that of it crashing in, as you saw, and then there's another video of one flying from a greater distance. You can see it actually fly down and blow up. I thought I had that, but apparently I haven't. Nevertheless, another Ukrainian drone strike at the Oman base in Grozny using an E-300 Enterprise drone. Local sources report 4 explosions so far. 4. The military base is reported to be often used for deployments to Ukraine. Interesting. Oh, there it is. I won't show that because it explodes. But yeah, there you go. Let me know what you think about striking into Grozny. Okay, moving on to other bits and pieces, and a fair bit to say here. Now, this video is interesting. It was just a Russian training incident of how to take off one magazine and put on another, and then the guy sort of talking them through it, keep going, do that, move it here, and then he starts asking how old they are, and you can see these guys are old, and they're all like 50s, 60s, occasionally 46, I think is the youngest of all of these people. I think that guy at 60, this guy's 63, and he goes down and he just asks them, and he's like, what the F, you're 63. Change it again, and then yeah, each one of them 56, 55, 63. It's just incredible. And you're thinking, wow, that is, well, I think yes, it's anecdotal, but it does give us an indication that Russia is having to pull suboptimal troops to suboptimal recruitment to their training centers to then push them to Ukraine. Now, Zaporizhzhian officials have dismissed rumors of a Russian offensive on the city. That is the city of Zaporizhzhia. And we've been hearing, in fact, here, listen to it. So we've been hearing this since September, October, November, and now December. It's all psychological ops, and society shouldn't react to it, said Ivan Fedorov, head of Zaporizhzhia's regional administration. So I've reported that there have been these rumors about a Russian attack up into Zaporizhzhia. There are, I would have thought the Russians would just continue where they're at, which is, pushing up from Velika Novosilka, pushing along from through Pokrovsk, pushing along through Kharkova, all those areas, and eventually, if you can keep going, you'll reach Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk. But of course, it would require an awful lot more personnel. Now, French aid to Ukraine says it's safe to assume that we may never hear feedback from the Anne of Kiev Brigade, as it seems to no longer exist. I reported this yesterday. This is the 155th Anne of Kiev Brigade that was trained in France and given French equipment. So Leopard 2A4s, AMX-10RC, those kind of light tanks on wheels, the VAB APCs that the French have been given to Ukraine because they're now phasing them out, and the Caesar self-propelled artillery pieces, and they're split into all these constituent parts. But from what we hear, they've been sent to the Donbass and then split into those parts and thrown to lots of different existing groups on the front line. And although that sounds like a real shame, you'd imagine this would be some great unit that then goes and does whatever. Actually needs must, and you can imagine there'll be units crying out for, we need artillery, we need drones, we need this, we need that, and this brigade has just been split up and thrown to different places. So the Anarchy Brigade is said to be engaged on the Pokrovsk front, but part of it was dismantled on its return to reinforce other brigades. This decision has been widely criticised. When questioned by the press, the French MOD said that the General Staff is using the 155th Brigade as it sees fit, and I guess that's all you can say. 155th, he says later, mechanised brigade, heavily armed and trained by the France this autumn, is said to have been deployed to Pokrovsk front. However, part of it was dismantled on its return to enforce other brigades. In response to the question from who is this? La Voix du Nord, Voice of the North media outlet. The Ministry of the Armed Forces replied that France is currently the only country to have implemented a complete training model, which has been welcomed by our Ukrainian partner. It was the Ukrainian Armed Forces that organised the selection of the Ukrainian soldiers who make up this brigade and the management of the flows. It is also, of course, the Ukrainian Armed Forces that define the conditions for deployment on Ukrainian soil. End quote. The Ministry of Armed Forces adds that with regard to the request of a Member of Parliament to supply drones to 155th Brigade, the censure of the government and the resignation of the ministers had suspended all requests, even the most urgent. So there were claims afterwards that actually this brigade will be less useful because they don't have the drones and whatnot, and the French need to get on and... This was coming from the French to supply them, but of course with the chaos politically in France, it appears that might not have happened. Anyway, nonetheless, this brigade has potentially been sort of at least somewhat broken up. Now, talking about Pokrovsk, so it could be these guys that have come to the rescue. So further Ukrainian reserves, says this particular source, further Ukrainian reserves were transferred to the Pokrovsk sector of the front and used in a powerful counterattack that moved from Pischany, that's another Pischany, towards Shevchenko. So that's just south of Pokrovsk where the Russians had attacked. Indeed, that's where base.ua, Anton from there, the organisation that Pierre works for, who I went around Ukraine with in the back of the battle bus with Chechnya and Greg. Pierre worked for base.ua and they were getting people out of Shevchenko, but it was really risky and 2 drones hit the van. Luckily, they got away with minor injuries and a van that hit the van in its kind of strongest part of the van. But that was Shevchenko, so really close to the front line. It's now the front line. Russian troops were forced to flee, and as Muchnoy reports, the airview entered Shevchenko and is still attacking. So there's been a bit of a pushback with reserves in Pokrovsk, which is obviously going to be music to people's ears in that area. Those fighting there desperately need reserves. A major counter battle took place near Pischany, according to the Ukrainian Defense Forces, and then the enemy then managed to force the enemy to flee. Counter battle took place with the use of grenades, hand grenade launchers, small arms. The enemy rolled back to the landings near Shevchenko. What else do we hear? Russia's worsening economic problems are causing Russian pharmaceutical manufacturers to abandon production of some medications due to fixed prices, making it unaffordable. The country is now reportedly short of 20 million units of saline solution, a vital medication. I know that I had these discussions during the week with Rick the Ukrainian and Jonathan Fink. I do believe that an economic collapse in Russia will have a slightly different effect, could have a more significant effect on Russia than some might predict, because are we in a comparable position to Russia in the Soviet Union times? There have been people who know now the expectations of kind of society that is, although it's not been perfectly democratic, it's been this oligarchy and a very much the rich have it, the poor don't, but people have been much more aware of medical provision, of all sorts of different things in society, and if that's taken away from them, I think it might have a slightly more pronounced effect than when they were fully behind the Iron Curtain back in the 1970s and 80s and whatnot. And, things like saline solution, not being able to get hold of that. And we can talk about different high-end luxury shops and all sorts, but also you're talking about butter. They're going back to Soviet times. Now, Jonathan Fink was saying, well, they're just used to that. They're a pliant population and they will just suck it up. And I think that is a very high probability of that happening. But, I think you're going to find, if you start having oligarchs running away, if you start I just think that you need to have a collapse, even if it's not as much an effect on the Russian population. They're not going to get up in arms and start revolting against the Kremlin. You absolutely need an economic collapse. I think it will have an effect right across society, and it is what, at the end of the day, the Russians need to be able to afford to commit to this war. The Kremlin needs to have money to do this. And if they're not getting money from hydrocarbons, if they're not being able to access Africa because Syria's gone, if you're turning off some of their money pipelines and the economy internally is collapsing, then this is all going to help. Russian media is reporting shortages of saline solution in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and many other regions of Russia. It's unavailable in many pharmacies. Doctors are rationing rapidly, dwindling supplies, and patients reportedly face a 2-month wait for IV drips. Production costs have increased sharply due to shortages of foreign components such as water treatment systems and packaging materials. However, the Russian government fixes retail prices of medication. Saline solution now costs less to buy than ordinary bottled water. This is despite saline solution being considerably more complicated to manufacture than bottled water. Russian manufacturers complain that they can now only produce it at a loss. This has caused them to reduce production by 40 to 50% between January and September 2024. There's now a severe shortage of saline solution across Russia. In Krasnodar, local pharmacies have not received any since February. Elsewhere in Russia, supplies to pharmacies have largely ceased since November. Doctors are now having to ration IV drips. Russia has faced shortages of many medications since the start of the war in Ukraine due to economic problems and the effect of sanctions. They have included immunoglobulin, insulin, antibiotics, and heart disease medications. However, the lack of saline solution is more serious than any of these due to its fundamental importance for most medical procedures. Demand for it has increased sharply due to the large number of injuries being sustained in the war in Ukraine. Supplies may run out by January. The Russian government has agreed to increase the fixed price of saline solution and other medications so that they are once again economically viable for manufacturers to produce. It's not expected that shortages will be resolved until at least February to March 2025. So, interesting data point there. Niger in reverse. So what's been going on here? Well, this is in Syria. A convoy of US armoured vehicles and US military SUVs has entered Ain al-Arab Kobani, a former Russian military base there. They've also taken control of former bases in Sarin and Ain Issa. Interesting. So where we have seen places in the Sahel region of Africa, we've seen the French and Americans pull out there and then Russian-supported regimes take control. Here we are seeing Russia pull out of bases in Syria and the Americans going in afterwards. So an interesting reversal there. As well, not a major problem on its own, says Tim White. It can happen anywhere, but in Russia, this is so common. Passengers were kept on board for several hours of an airline before engineers deemed the engine fault irreparable. Eventually, they went from Kamchatka to Moscow on an alternative plane. Again, the aviation industry in Russia in a bit of freefall. And Dmitry Medvedev has just stated that he considered it possible for new regions to become part of Russia. We've seen this before, but look at Medvedev. He's on that again. I mean, that's an image we've seen from previously, but he's talking up the idea that today Ukraine is facing a choice to be with Russia or to disappear from the world map forever, Medvedev told the International Life magazine after his trip to China. It looks like an ultimatum and a refusal to start negotiations. So there is that. Anyway, that's enough from me. Quite a lot of data today. Hopefully that was of interest to you. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed already, I'd love to get to 50,000. I'd love to get to 49,000 today. We're unlikely to reach 50,000 subscribers by this, or 50,139 by the 2nd of January. But we can but try. More importantly, though, head over to Trucks Under Christmas Tree, Car for Ukraine, and help out the efforts that we have there to get 2 trucks. Go and watch those videos on that page. I'll try and do a separate sort of fundraising video to just highlight some of these pieces of video footage and some of the figures that we've achieved. I'll try and do that today. In the meantime, take care, guys. I'll speak to you soon.